Welcome back to the table. Today, Ryan and I are back with you to talk a little bit more about Oathsworn. We are 5 chapters in now, and we thought we would do kind of a review in progress. We're on the road to getting through this entire campaign, and we told you in our Just Played, after playing 1 chapter, that we'd come back and sort of check in, give you a progress report, and we're here to do just that after Chapter 5.
Yeah, I think with a game like Oathsworn or any of these like big box campaign games, people were going to ask the question like, sure, you might really enjoy it after the first play, after the first scenario, when everything feels novel and new and cool, but does that experience hold up after 5 games? And we're out of like maybe 20, so we're about a quarter of the way through. And I feel like we have not yet experienced still everything this game has to offer, because every chapter so far has introduced something where I'm like, oh, I had no idea
that the game even did this.
That the game did this, or that we'd be going in this direction or adding in these new elements. And if they can keep that going for 15 more chapters, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and if you're still with us because you're not worried about spoilers, I do want to reassure everyone worried about spoilers. We are not going to spoil anything in here. In fact, we've removed figures from the board from Chapter 5 so you don't know what's going to happen. This is the same board that's used for almost all the encounters that we've encountered so far. And we'll avoid specifics about what has happened, but we will speak in generalities to the kinds of things that happen. But even there, I think we'll stay away from getting too specific so you don't... Because the thing about this game, the big thing thus far, is really experiencing those things. The game itself is great. A lot of the things that it's doing well. Like we said in the Just Played, it can be a little... I don't want to say fiddly, but you definitely have to learn the systems. And we continue to look things up, to confirm things. Have to maybe go to BGG, little less than we did initially. The more we play, the more we're getting. But there's a little bit of that with any kind of game like this, so I think that's to be expected.
Yeah, I mean, each one of these bosses so far, each one of these encounters has introduced some new mechanics that come with some new rules, and they come with these rules boards that introduce special rules, which are actually really cool because we actually discovered that you can discover the boss you're fighting earlier in the encounter based on some decisions you make. Maybe you talk to the right person or you get enough clues that you determine, oh, this is the monster or the boss that we're going to be fighting at the end. And you could unlock the board, which gives you kind of their basic rules, which is very useful because knowing that actually helps you prepare for the encounter. It helps you determine if you need specific items that you can pull out of your backpack, or maybe you have to go to the store to buy some additional things, or it can influence the ability cards you take into the battle. So each of these bosses can be approached with a lot of different strategies. And it's neat that the way the game actually kind of incentivizes you to put the clues together by giving you that piece of information. Because like we said earlier, each boss is vastly different. They don't just pop into the board and do the same thing. Okay, attack them, they attack you. They all have unique decks, unique special rules, unique strategies and weaknesses. And uncovering that has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, we have fought on the boss front everything. A lot of them are big things, some with minions, some without minions. We've fought humanoid type boss events, a really varied approach there. And not only that, but their deck of encounter cards is unique for each encounter. And so their attacks are very different. I would, again, relate that very much to like a video game boss fight where you go through a whole video game and each boss is like, okay, what's this one doing?
Yeah.
And what's its patterns? You can do that a little bit. Not so much in the pattern front because there's not like a lot of rinse and repeat through the cards that it's doing, although they duplicate a few of them.
Yeah, and a lot of the cards will trigger some of the special abilities that are listed on their card. So you know what things they're going to do right away. And it is really neat because you always get to see the next encounter card. And it does, we talked about this in our Just Played, how it kind of represents your strategic knowledge.
Yeah.
You fought these creatures before as an Oathsworn company. You know what they're potentially going to do. And sometimes knowing that move ahead of time feels very thematic. It's like it's almost like you're watching the boss and you're like, okay, he's going to do this thing, so we need to move around the board or get into these specific positions. And that's a very thematic feeling, but also feels very strategic as well.
Absolutely. At first, you're going to say, oh, this kind of feels like you're gaming the game. Like, oh, well, let's see what the boss is going to do before I decide what I'm going to do. But like Ryan just said, I think that does really capture the thematic aspect of us kind of knowing how to operate out in the deep wood and measuring up these bosses. One other thing that we didn't talk about too much in our Just Played that we mentioned, but we wanted to talk about more here, is the battle flow system. The battle flow system, for any character that you're playing as in its full form, because you can play as companions or full characters, you're going to have these ability cards. And when you use an ability card, which is one of the things you can do on your turn, you use a card, you pay for the animus to play it, you resolve it, and then it's going to be placed around your board in a specific cooldown slot, which is noted on the card itself. That card stays there until another card is played in that spot. It doesn't just naturally start cooking around the board. So you have to be very strategic about how you use your cards so that you can get some of those cards back into your hand. Now, there are other things that will allow you. There's some abilities that let you battle flow one card. There's tokens that let you battle flow all the cards in one position. So there's a lot of ways to manipulate that. And I'll say for me personally, I've been playing the Ranger, and I haven't really run into a lot of reasons to battle flow, except one mission where the encounters have gotten, I wouldn't say they've gotten progressively more difficult, but we had our most challenging encounter here.
5 was our hardest
5
one.
was the most challenging one, and I think it's because we approached it a little wrong. And that's another thing that's really interesting, because not only are you having to think about the strategy of how you move your cards around and all the other things in the systems, but you don't want to just necessarily go, okay, well, there's a bad guy and we can just run in and kill it. You know, we've had situations where there were friendlies on the board, civilians that we had to potentially save and things, and they were in jeopardy.
Or items you have to pick up. There's just been stuff you have to do.
And how you approach those, depending on the encounter, can also vary. So I would encourage anyone who hasn't played, who wants to start to play, before you start an encounter, really look at that encounter. If you earned the encounter board, read through that. Consider that as you're choosing your cards. Now, at the beginning of the game, you only have so many ability cards, but we've leveled up now, and even the companions will get a different card that gives them a couple different abilities as opposed to the ones that they start with. But all of that goes into like looking at the encounter before you start and going, okay, we've taken in all the information we can, and this is probably the best approach. And even then, you might not have the best approach in mind.
Now, see, I'm the opposite with the Warbear, and that I've been relying on Battle Flow a ton because the Warbear is like a front unit. Like, he's right up there. Whatever monster we're fighting, I'm in the front line. I'm taking a lot of damage, and you can play cards into your Battle Flow as defense. And the fun part of playing the Warbear, the puzzle has been getting out his most powerful defense card and then finding a way to chain cards to get that defense card back in my hand quickly so that I can play it again. Because you've got to survive. I mean, no spoilers here, but I'll say that the Warbear has been the most knocked out character we've had so far.
He's been the most aggressive.
So he gets knocked out a lot.
We have had some knockouts. We've had, I think, a total of 4 knockouts.
Yep.
And the way that works is you just track that on your free company sheet.
And we're not playing hardcore mode.
We're not playing hardcore mode.
If you get knocked out, you're dead. We're not doing that.
You get knocked out, the next scenario you can bring that back. And in fact, the game basically suggests that every chapter you could start with different ones if you wanted to. There's this long list of characters to choose from.
You get to know your character, you get to know how they work. I don't know if that I want the burden of trying to know and strategize with several different characters. Like, we're each controlling one main one and one I have the priest, who's my companion. And at this point, I kind of know what they can do and how to work together really well.
With that said, there's going to be moments where you do have to be, you have to learn some things that you weren't expecting to learn. Again, no spoilers at all.
So I want to mention 2 quick things. The questions I had at the beginning of the game. One thing that I don't want to say that I was disappointed by, but that I wasn't excited by, was that it's always the same board. And it's always, we have the same types of terrain. We have these trees. If you look at the box, there's like trees, walls, and houses. Okay.
And there's another side to this board, but thus far we've experienced this board with anywhere from 4 to 5 trees, maybe a couple of other things.
But I will say that as we've played through these 5 encounters, the actual way that these things have come out to the board have made it so dynamic that it really does feel like you're playing in a very different place. It doesn't feel samey at all. They're all very unique and interesting.
I 100% agree with that. Like, I'm blown away that I'm even saying this right now. But I generally set up the board before he comes over when we're playing. And after I set it up, I'm like, and I think it is because they paint such a vivid picture leading up to what you're going into. And of course, a lot of this is happening in the deep wood. So the deep wood is the deep wood, so it generally looks like this. So it's got enough variety with the way the trees have been placed, the enemies that are on the board, how the enemies interact with you, that sort of takes center stage as opposed to the backdrop. But yeah, every time I've looked at the board, I'm like, oh, it almost feels like we've set up a completely different board, even though we're using effectively the same components.
This is also the first game I've seen you where you stop, we get to a certain position, you're like, I got to take a picture. Like, this looks so cool. It like looks like such a cinematic shot.
Yeah.
I would love if we had painted minis, because I think that would make things look really
Don't say
cool.
that. I so badly would love painted minis for this. Although I will say, if you're well into the game, I don't know that we're going to be encountering a lot of these same things again.
Probably not.
Probably not. So it's almost like, something
comes back for revenge.
We'll never experience that rap from the chapter 1 again like that.
So the second thing I want to mention is the story. People have talked about the story feeling like it's on rails, or that you don't have a lot of decisions to make. And when you're actually playing the story, like, it is kind of on rails in that it is presenting you with a point A to point B story that I found very engaging and very interesting, and it has kept me motivated to play more to find out what happens next, because it's a very well told story.
Yeah.
It's a very well voice acted story. But when you're playing it, you don't necessarily have a sense of like, are the decisions that we're making changing our game and making it so different from anybody else's, or are our decisions kind of taking us to the same place? And I kind of had that in the back of my mind as we played through the first 5 scenarios. And then we got to this point, and I won't spoil it, but we got to this point and it asked us to look at all the allies we had. And it gave us a list of like 10 or something possible allies that we could have, and we had one of them.
Yeah, I don't know that it was 10, but it was a
lot. It was a big list.
A lot of names that we had never heard of before.
So then I was like, well, I guess we have had quite a different story experience getting to this place, because some of these characters we never even met, let alone like brought on board as allies. And so it did make me wonder, there might be somebody out there playing a very different game. Sure, the beats of the story are the same, but the little character moments are going to be different based on who you talk to, where you go. Because I know for us, a lot of locations, or a lot of the scenarios have taken us to locations that we didn't visit.
Yeah.
So there's potentially little side plots and things that we might have seen or not seen that other people didn't get. And to me, that makes the story like more personal. Like, this is our version of the story that we're telling.
For sure. I wouldn't say, so to bookend that, I would say the branching paths within a story, it feels like you have those. But if you're going to sit back afterwards and look back, some of it is a bit of an illusion probably.
Yeah.
But I would say just give yourself into that illusion. Now, what's not an illusion is the fact that I think and this isn't a spoiler, the chapters that we've played, a number of them, and maybe all of them, but a number of them have had at least 2 significant routes that you could take during the story that are very different, like completely different, probably stories. Like in a couple of the chapters, and it comes right out to you and says, okay, you can do one of these things, but you can't do both. So you make your decision and you go down this path, and then you don't know any at all about what happened on the other thing, because it was a completely unrelated, route that you could take.
Yeah, and you're always going to end up at the chapter encounter.
We believe so.
We believe so, because the encounter book shows you how to set up the encounter, and it's always whatever. The encounter might always be the same, which is fun, but again, just the way that the path you take to get there. If you're telling somebody your story of Oathsworn, and you say, oh, remember that moment where this thing happened? They might go, well, no, I never even met that character.
You're going to have those moments where people are like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And we've had some chapters that have gone wildly different. This is the last thing I want to comment on, is we talked about this earlier. There are moments in this game where it keeps upping the ante about what this game is offering, to where you played chapter 1, that's fine. Chapter 2, great. Chapter 3, you start to feel like, whoa, what is this game doing? Then chapter 4, you're like, what? It really is doing things that make it feel like, oh, you thought this game was this? Well, now there's this too. And it's a very different system even for play. It's almost like things that you have to learn in terms of how to play again. And it's all been really, really satisfying.
Yeah, that's the key. Is it has been really satisfying, and it does lead me to want to play more, to keep playing, even after 5 scenarios, because the way that we've seen some of these things that have happened have changed the game. It just leaves my brain reeling as far as what else could there be? Like, what crazy other stuff could they have in store? I'm sure there's more stuff in store. So I'm not getting bored with it. I'm actually more invigorated to find out what's happening next.
Yeah, and from what we've heard, there have been people in our comments and people in our Discord talking about having gotten through like chapter 18 or maybe all the way through the game. And I haven't heard anyone say anything other than it keeps it up. I honestly, the cynical side of me didn't figure it would keep it up through 5 chapters. But to hear that it might keep that up through all of that is pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah, and here's the last thing I want to say. Get the app. Just play this game.
Yeah, we
with
said
the
that
app.
in the Just Played too.
It's so good. And the guy that voice acts this, I'll say it again. This is some of the best reading. It's almost like listening to an audiobook.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's perfect for it. And it's brought so much flavor. Plus, not having to track a lot of this stuff and having the app track stuff for you it's just taken a load off from us so that we can just feel free to experience the story.
Yeah, because there's a couple moments as going through the story where it looked like we were going to have to reference a book, and there's even incorporated a couple more than just the storybook in some chapters, and the app pretty much took care of all of that. Almost
all, because sometimes you look at the time track for the game, and every time you place a time token on the board, it triggers an event, and then you have to go find the book. You have to find the event. It's going to be different if you're on path A or path B. All these things that will take you out of the game, but the app just knows it all. And so when you go to a new location, it just automatically goes, and that has, at least for me, it's made this experience so smooth and seamless.
Yeah, so thus far, I would say, I'm going to grade the experience. This is not what we typically do. It's not even a number. But thus far, if you can't tell already, I'm giving this an A.
For sure.
The experience that we've had, I can't even think of a thing to be terribly critical of, other than if you're someone who just doesn't want to fiddle around with rules and figure things out as you play. This game's got some of that going on. But other than that, this game is an A.
I agree. For what it's wanting to do, it is the perfect representation of this style of game.
And we will be back one more time. Maybe more, but definitely one more time with our full review, and we are going to wait until we've played the entire campaign. Yeah. When that will be, I make no guarantees.
At this rate, maybe in a month or two.
But we definitely want to get all the way through the end, and then we'll have a full, complete, robust review going about everything, and it will probably be 100% spoiler-filled.
Sure.
Because we've avoided spoilers thus far, but at some point we got to get all of this off of our chest.
Yeah, we got to get some spoilers going.
So if you have any questions, make them in the comments below. Or if you have any specific questions and you want things spoiled, maybe come over to our Discord and join us and message us there, and we'll be able to answer any of the questions anywhere you want to ask them. Until next time, though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.